pod bay doors, please, Hal.
The pod bay doors are slightly open. Welcome once again to our mini episodes. This is the show about everything. If Seinfeld was a show about nothing, this is a show about anything. I'm Jerry Dean Roberts of ArmchairCinema.com, sitting here with my co-host, the legend and critic from TalkMovieMe.com, Mr. Doug Geller. How the heck are you today, sir?
Recovering from a cold, so getting there.
You're kind of in that stage where it's like on its way out.
Yeah. My throat's still sore, but I'm not really coughing. My nose is a little bit runny, so if I sound a little deeper than usual, my voice, then that's why. Whenever I get a cold, I go about 2 octaves deeper.
There's always that stage when you have a cold, because colds for me last about 5 days. There's always that one day when my head just feels like mud. It's like nothing in your head is moving.
Yeah.
Forgive us if you're eating, by the way. But
At least we're not going into great detail.
I had a cold a couple of weeks ago, so I feel you.
Yeah.
But
that's not what we're here to talk about.
Sad news this week. The passing of, tragically, way too soon, the passing of John Singleton.
51 years old, major stroke. They took him off of life support on, the 29th?
He suffered from hypertension.
April 29th. We had a major stroke.
Yeah.
And they took him off life support, and he passed away at 51.
Yeah, he suffered from hypertension, which, as I understand it, I don't know statistics, but as I understand it, is fairly common for black men his age.
Regrettably, yes, it is. Hypertension is, of course, high blood pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I could go into a whole lot of things that I've read and discovered about the ambient stress levels
Mm-hmm.
for African Americans in the United States of America, and how that contributes to overall poor health, and also physicians who don't really care to treat black people in the United States of America, or they say, "Oh, well, you're blacks and you have this, so yeah, that's normal," and then they disregard it, and often fatally. It is tragic on so many levels, more than just John Singleton.
Yeah.
This is the kind of stuff that we don't get into on the regular show.
That's what this mini episode's about.
You could just put SJW at the end of my name, because that's pretty much where. And I am damn proud of it.
Yeah.
But we've lost a magnificent filmmaker. The first black person to ever be nominated for Best Director, and therefore the first black person to ever lose the Oscar for Best Director. Because
And how many times has it ever happened?
6.
6 times, okay.
Counting Spike Lee for BlacKkKlansman.
Okay,
6.
so the only time it's ever actually happened, has it happened yet? Was it Steve McQueen? Barry Jenkins. Is it Barry Jenkins?
For Moonlight?
Yeah. I thought he won.
He didn't win Best Director.
Oh.
What's his name? Damien Chazelle did for La La Land.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, there has not yet been a black person win Best Director.
But with the changes in the Academy in the last few years...
Yeah, that's what they said last year.
I think it's on its way.
You know what? It's so ridiculous that they have to change their voting membership for equality.
Yeah.
Like, what is the problem? Why is the reason that there aren't as many prominent black filmmakers is because that they don't get an opportunity
Right.
because the white studio executives are like, well, they don't make movies for the masses. Well, but
Well,
anybody
if you
can
don't make
make
movies
any
for the
kind of movie.
masses, then you're not going to put it out there. And if you don't make them, then nobody's going to see them.
Exactly. And it took, just like it took Patty Jenkins to with Wonder Woman to prove that a woman can helm uh,
A major popcorn movie.
yeah, to amazing degree. It
And
took
also,
Ryan Coogler
and
to
also,
do Black Panther.
Catherine Bigelow proved that you can make a a serious film that's very good. That's not about women.
Right.
She
Hurt
directed The
Locker's
Hurt Locker.
really good. Well, she is, as far as industry standards go,
Mm-hmm.
an atypical woman filmmaker.
Right.
I think that that is an incredibly limiting concept.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't. So I have mixed things that go along with all of this. Do I think that a white man should tell a story about being black in America? No. Do I think that therefore then white people should only direct movies with white people and black people should only direct movies with black people? Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, 9 chances out of 10, a good director is a good director and they can do any subject matter, be they white, black, Asian, man, woman, it doesn't matter.
Well, if you go back to when Boyz N the Hood came out, he was 23 when he directed that. My God, what was I doing? When I was 23. But
Well, I know what I was doing when I was 23.
yeah, you were 11.
When I
No,
was 20, when I was 23, I was a father and then lost mine. So, but I was just out of college. I didn't do it. I hadn't done anything.
well, when Boyz N the Hood came out, it was a hit.
Yeah,
It was a hit, and it
it
came
was a
on the heels.
phenomenon.
It was, and it came on the heels of Do the Right Thing,
That was
which
2 years later, right?
now Do the Right Thing was a movie about a neighborhood.
Which we talked about in
Which check out
February.
our episode, which was a great film just about a neighborhood
Hmm.
and the things that go on there, the racial tensions that go on.
Hmm.
Boys in the Hood was about the things that people expected Do the Right Thing to be about,
Hmm.
which was about the guns and the problems and the
Right, and I think that the two. Now, full disclosure, I hang my head as I say this, and Jerry can confirm that because we are on Google Hangouts.
mhm.
I have not seen all of Boys in the Hood.
For
I've seen
shame.
maybe 15 minutes of it. It's one of the things that I regret the most. It was I regret not seeing that as much as I regretted not seeing Passion of Joan of Arc, but I have since seen Passion of Joan of Arc and I still haven't gotten to Boys in the Hood. Um,
Well,
but
Boys in the Hood was unusual because how do I say this? Now I was in my 20s when that movie came out. I'm around John Singleton's age, just slightly younger. And the funny thing is, and I heard this. I was kind of upset when I heard this at the time, but now I kind of have embraced it. Someone called it a scare whitey picture.
I could see
And
that.
in terms of if you have a movie studio and you have a boardroom full of 60-year-old white men, they're going to look at this movie and it'll scare them to death because they're seeing the box office and they're thinking, okay, the only people that are going to go see this, if this is the way of it, the only people that are going to go see this are young black men, and believing that that's a narrow audience, which it's not.
It's not, and it's. I think that entertainment commerce took a sharp downturn when demographics became a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. We want to reach the widest possible audience. We want this thing to be able to sell in Ethiopia.
Right, and the whole
Now you do want to get your money back,
right,
but
but
you know,
they ever since Jaws, and I'm not blaming Jaws for this. This was something that was going to happen eventually anyway, with changing tides and changing marketing strategies. Post Godfather, skipping the limited release and the rollout and just going to a straight out flat wide release.
2,000 screens.
Yeah, which I think now the most screens a movie has ever debuted on was Avengers Endgame, which was something like 4,165 or something more like that.
Oh my God! I looked at this. I looked at the show times for that the other day. I was going to go back because I've seen it. I was going to go back and see it a second time. I looked at the show times for that. There were 18 showings in one theater,
and it's a 3-hour movie.
And that's starting about every 30 to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's not including the IMAX screenings.
Yeah. I mean, it's no wonder that the thing hit $1.2 billion in the first weekend it was open. But we do have a special episode that will be posted not long after this one, I hope.
As soon as we can get it up there.
My family and I are going out of town for a few days, so I don't know when the end game is going to go up. It depends on if I can take it with me or not to cut it and put it up. But that whole idea that we want to put it in every possible screen from New York through Peoria back to LA, it's like,
here to Timbuktu.
You can't. Not everything is going to appeal to everybody.
And believe it or not, there are some people who don't care about Endgame.
Right. There's about 12 people in the world that probably haven't seen it.
There's a thing that comes up, and I don't know what else opened last weekend, but there's this thing that happens. It happens all. You notice this whenever a movie like this opens. There's usually what I like to call a girlfriend alternative. There's usually a romantic comedy that opens, like opposite that, because the guys will go and the assumption is the guys will go and see the big, the dinosaur movie or the superhero movie, and the girls will want to see the romantic comedy. Well, if you could see the attendance that I saw at Endgame, it was mostly women.
My
and not
theater,
just with the boyfriend.
Right. My theater was mixed. Kids with their parents, teenagers, early 20, people on dates, people not on dates, people, adults with no kids, kids with no adults, and it really is one of the universal things now. And that's mostly because people my age and a little younger have toddlers and a little older, 5, 6, 8-year-old kids that are into these, and so were we when we were kids. We had the Iron Man cartoon show. We had the Fantastic Four terrible cartoon show. We had Batman. My generation, almost more than anybody else's, although you had Super Friends when you were a kid.
And I was not the better for it.
As did I. Oh, God, I've tried to rewatch those recently. Ooh.
I'm just not a DC guy. I'm sorry.
I am, and I still can't get into the old Super Friends stuff. That is brutal. I mean, it's trying to watch the old Spider-Man cartoon from the 70s.
Oh, God.
Oh, that is painful.
Was it Starfire and Iceman?
Yeah. Superman and Friends? or
Hmm.
Spider-Man and Friends. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Oh, that was a terrible show. Um,
I
Anywho,
was. The funny thing is, I was always looking for something different. I think that's why I grew up and fell in love with movies. And coming back to John Singleton, one of the things that I noted, because I don't want, I generally, when I was that age, just did not get in the cattle lines,
mhm.
to go and see. I didn't have to see the biggest movie in the world that weekend. I wanted to see something a little different, and that's why I came to Boyz N the Hood, and why um, I think, and this is a theory. If you'll forgive me, this is a theory. I think there was a thinking in Hollywood that John Singleton was a little more manageable than Spike Lee, because Spike
that
Lee was
that's a mistake
was
to
such
make.
a well. What I mean by that is Spike Lee's a troublemaker. He always
He
has been,
is. He
in a good
is.
way.
Yeah, he speaks his mind. He's not afraid of the powers that be, and he pretty much figures if he pisses off the wrong person, he'll make another good person
Mhm.
happy, so he'll be able to get money from them. It's
And I think they thought that that's what John Singleton. They thought that John Singleton was somebody that wouldn't do that. And the thing is, the thing is, because he was sort of when he got nominated for Best Director, reasonably, he was touted as the next big thing. Somebody that was really gonna open the door for African American directors.
yeah.
The problem that I have, and someone may correct me on this, the career I expected him to have didn't happen.
The same for me. I When I saw that he was directing Too Fast, Too Furious,
Hmm.
I was kind of devastated.
I was too. I was devastated by Shaft because the thing is, he was always wanting to make films with a commentary, but at the same time, occasionally, Shaft was a mess.
It was, and I have seen that one. Um,
There weren't the one film he did make that was the successor to Boyz N the Hood was Rosewood,
mm-hmm.
which is like Boyz N the Hood and like Menace to Society, a great film, a devastating film that I can't watch again.
Yeah, that
It's
Ving
hard to
Rhames, right?
watch. What?
Ving Rhames, right?
Yeah, that's a movie about. I think it takes place in the 20s.
It's Ving Rhames and John Voight, isn't it?
Yeah, and someone starts a rumor. A kid starts a rumor, and that there's been a crime committed by someone black, and it just balloons into this giant riot. There
Mm-hmm.
are lynchings. It's devastating. It's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to watch, but it's a good film.
Mm-hmm.
And then he made two films that, boy, I never figured out. I never figured out Poetic Justice.
That is a. There are defenders.
Yeah,
Um,
there are defenders. I'm not one of them. Although I will say, it's one of the very, very rare opportunities to see what a good actor Tupac was.
that's
He
true.
was a very good actor,
Yeah,
and
Janet Jackson's pretty good too.
Janet Jackson is pretty good. It's just the movie is so pedestrian.
Yeah, it is.
Um, and I got to tell you, Higher Learning.
I know that one.
Higher Learning is the first. Higher Learning, when that came out, that was the first time I ever heard the phrase "hot mess," because it is.
Yeah, it is.
Racial tensions on a college campus, which you can do and you can do well. But boy, that movie goes in about 45 different directions.
Right. Yeah.
And it has so many characters in it. It's a mess.
It was a weird attempt at a like a Robert Altman style picture,
Mixed
and
with a little bit of Boyz N the Hood.
yeah, and it was unfocused.
Have you seen Snowfall?
No.
I haven't either, and I'm now, I really want to.
Right. And I was dismayed when I was looking back over his stuff that, for the past, what, 10 years or more, he's been primarily or exclusively in television.
But at least he was working.
Yeah, he was working. He would do like an episode here, an episode there of some things, and I think he directed him a few episodes of Empire,
Yeah,
and which which is not a step down.
yeah.
that that show is, whew. Um,
That's a good show.
yeah, and he got to Taraji P Henson is on there. He got to
Mm-hmm.
work with her again. Um,
Is it Terrence Howard?
yeah,
Yeah. But it was never the career that I expected him to have.
right.
Um,
He did a lot more producing over
yeah,
the years. I think he was a producer on Hustle and Flow.
he was.
Um, so I mean, he did shepherd some really good stuff into being.
Yeah.
I wish he had been allowed to be more active and more vocal as a feature director.
Mm.
Um, I feel like he had volumes to say
Yeah.
and was never afforded that opportunity because so many executives, not people, but executives, were afraid of Boyz N the Hood somehow igniting violence. The
Yeah.
whole, and that wasn't Marilyn Quayle on some sort of a big pitch before?
Oh, Marilyn Quayle's on a lot of crap. But
Well, yeah.
well, I mean, the problem was, and I've been watching, kind of sideways watching old Siskel and Ebert episodes. They were talking about violence that was coming out when New Jack City came out,
Oh, yeah.
and noted that, and Gene Siskel was like, okay, I want journalists to be responsible about stories like this
Hmm.
because it's not like the movie is inside. It's like not like in Boyz N the Hood was the same way. It's not like the movie was inciting violence inside the theater. Most of the violence that were taking place, and there were a few isolated incidents,
Hmm.
were taking place before the movie even started.
Right.
So it wasn't like they were sitting in the theater and the movie just boiled everybody up.
Hmm.
No, it wasn't like that.
No, and it's the same. It's the same idiot thing that was it Tipper Gore started taking up in the late '90s. So, oh, the lyrics in these songs or these violent video games are causing violence in youth. That's not it.
You didn't live through this. Well, you lived through it when you were a little kid, but I remember the Satanic Panic era.
Oh no, I do too.
You remember all
Oh,
the videos, all
uh-huh.
the Christian
Oh yeah.
videos? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. No, that was as real in elementary school as I'm sure it was
Hmm.
in middle and high school for you. There
It was
was.
fascinating.
Oh
The
yeah.
crap they
Oh
would
yeah.
come up with.
Oh yeah. And the connotations that you were taught to uh, apply to kids that you knew were listening to Metallica and uh, you know all the heavy metal bands and
Hmm.
everything that were out then, and hair bands and all that. It's like none of that is doing what you think it's doing.
And all that crap that they came up with when you remember the backmasking. You play a record backwards and
Hmm.
you can
Hmm.
hear certain.
Hmm.
If you listen to a record backwards, you can hear anything.
And none of it makes any sense.
All you hear when you play a record backwards, yip, 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 you can
Right.
hear whatever you want to hear.
Whatever you want to. Uh, just like they and that's been going on. I mean, what was it on the White Album?
Yeah,
The Beatles, they allegedly put on there, if you listen to it backwards, that Paul is dead. Paul is dead.
yeah.
Paul wasn't dead. And they even said, I actually have a book on that whole Paul is dead thing.
Hmm.
Each one of them admitted within the controversy at the time
Mhm.
that they were just fucking with people.
Yeah.
And I think John Lennon said it exactly like that.
Yep.
Like, we just thought it was fun. And
I'm
that's why they kept doing all that stuff, like the Abbey Road cover and everything. It's like, we thought it was hilarious.
Look, I'm fascinated. I am fascinated by when someone wants to negate something, they will come up with anything they can come up with.
Anything.
Just the whole thing about the shootings outside the theater with Boyz N the Hood, things like that. It's fascinating the things that. Well, the movie's just it's getting young kids riled up. No, it's not. It's really not. It's encouraging kids to go out and shoot people.
No, what it is, it's showing a larger audience what life was like,
Mhm.
is like, for disadvantaged kids in urban situations, non-urban situations. It,
It's no different than
it's racism.
it's no di- yeah, pretty much. It's no different to me. It's no different than if you watch the movie Milk
Yeah.
and you see how black men were treated in San Francisco in the early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different.
No.
It's eye-opening because it shows you a culture that is stamped down, pushed down, shoved to the back. Just like the guy in Office Space. I'm going to push you back, further against that wall.
Mm-hmm.
And because you don't matter.
Right.
And we don't want to deal with you. And so we're going to close you off in this little section. We're going to shut the door.
Mm-hmm.
And if you try to get out, we're going to make you look like, demon spawn.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the larger, that's happened with gays, it happened with blacks, it happened with Jews, it happened with the Irish, it happens.
Yeah,
It
it's
happens in so many
institutionalized bigotry
Yeah.
that
Systemic oppression.
we're going to put you in this box, and that's where you're going to be. And then if people try to get out of that box, they say, well, we're going to show you your place. Anytime anybody says, you belong here, this is your place, go back to your place, that is institutionalized oppression, bigotry, racism, all of everything. Because it's basically saying, you're not white, cis, straight, male, so you don't matter.
You don't count.
Right. Which is asinine.
A lot of what has been happening in our culture lately has been massive attempts to try and overturn that. And in some instances it works, in some instances it doesn't. I'm very, very happy to see that gays and lesbians are finally moving into a place where they're not sheltered and have to hide in plain sight. I'm very happy that
it depends on where they live and
right.
what the family situation is.
Probably easier for a gay couple to live in Pittsburgh than it is in Birmingham.
Undoubtedly.
But
still ain't easy.
It still ain't easy. Because the social stigma has to wash away. The generational thing has to wash away.
Yeah, I mean, and it's the same thing, interracial couples or prominent or wealthy minorities that continually get, oh, why are you in this neighborhood? I said, well, I own a house here.
Yeah.
I said, that's my house. Well, that's too nice for you. Really? It was like that Dave Chappelle thing. He said, well, where I live, I got broken into, but I couldn't call the cops because my house is nice. It's not really that nice, but it's too nice for me. And, or at least that's what they would say. And they would just come in and see, oh, we caught him in the act. Boom. Look, he even came in here and put pictures of himself and his family up into this house. Just sprinkle some crack on him and we'll, Dave Chappelle's
It's like
great.
there's a great joke on, I remember the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air when I think somebody was trying to break in or something, and I forget his name, the cousin, the cousin,
Carlton?
calls the police, and they show up. Will says, "Damn, that was fast. They must have thought we was white folks."
Yeah.
There's a lot to that.
There is. There's an excessive amount to that.
But here's the thing: is it? And this is what drove me crazy. Is when Boyz N the Hood came out. It was this real portrait of what was going on in the inner city, in the black neighborhoods. Young black men with guns, which happened. Young black men with drugs, which happened. And the thing is, what followed Boyz N the Hood, if you really look at the films that Hollywood was making with young black men, almost this entire genre of films with black men with guns.
See,
Guns.
the problem is that the studio executives decided to make this into like this and Do the Right Thing as like launching pads for exploitation,
Right.
and they
The second wave of
considered
exploitation.
right they considered these exploitation films because they were, but what they were and what they are showing the reality of the situation in America,
Mm.
but all the executives can think of is how can we monetize this?
Right.
Well, let's give them what they want. They want black guys with guns. Let's give them black guys with guns. It's like that. You're missing the point. This is a social commentary, not a shoot 'em up picture.
I always say the trilogy, the unofficial trilogy for me, Do the Right Thing shows a neighborhood without a lot of these problems. Without a lot of the issues of guns and drugs and things that people expect.
Mhm.
The second part of that trilogy is Boyz N the Hood, which shows people trying to live their lives and trying to do the right thing and trying to, in the midst of
With all of this going on around.
with all of this going on around
Yeah.
them. And then the third part, the tragic part, is Menace to Society,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is about the criminal element.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the criminal element that does this, but it's about the criminal element that does this as part of the culture in which they have to live. It's
And
this young man,
it's survival.
right? And it's survival. He doesn't, the character in that movie is not Kane, is not inherently a bad person.
Mm-mm.
He's a dangerous person because of the environment that he's
Because
been
he's
brought
he's
up
had to become so.
in. Right.
Like you can't make things so bad for people that they have to turn to crime and murder just to survive, and then say the people that look like this or live here are all criminals and murderers because look at the crime rate here. It's like you've made that the only way they can live.
Mm.
By
Yeah.
redlining housing districts, by
Gentrification.
gentrification, by restricting funds for schools and aid, and having the hoops that you need to go through just to get any kind of assistance to get yourself back on your feet
And
to
then when
not
you do
need
that,
it.
and when you do that, people accuse you of begging.
Yeah. It's
And
like,
the thing is,
I don't. Oh.
the idea is one of the things that
The-
came from Boyz N the Hood for me was the term gentrification,
Mhm.
because you haven't gotten to this yet because you haven't seen the rest of the movie, but there is a scene where Lawrence Fishburne explains what gentrification is to a bunch of kids.
Mhm.
That is the first time I had ever heard that term, and it's and so something came out of this movie for me, is that I learned that term and I understood what it meant, and it's a springboard for a lot of things, because the idea of gentrification was explained to me. 20-something white kid.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an eye-opening experience in that way, and that's why I felt it was important. It was a section of America. Let's see, what is it? Sidney Poitier in The Heat of the Night would have called it "Where Whitey Ain't Allowed," because that's the neighborhood you're looking at in Boyz N the Hood. It's where you don't go. You don't get off the freeway, and it's showing you a world, a culture, a people that you are trained as a white person to ignore.
Ignore, avoid, all because it all stems back to to the same thing. But it's like, these are bad neighborhoods. Why? Because there's black people there? Mm-hmm. Well, no, because there's a lot of crime there. Why? Because there's a lot of black people there? Well, no, because they don't have it's a poorer neighborhood, so they need to. Oh, and why is that? Because options and opportunities have been drastically limited for people of color in the United States of America? Maybe.
Perhaps. That's the legacy of that film. And if he never had the career that I expected him to have, at least we have that.
Right. Boyz N the Hood is such a powerful document, he almost didn't need to make anything else.
Right.
I have heard, now I also have not seen this one, regrettably, but Baby Boy is a worthy follow-up.
Baby Boy
from what I've heard.
Baby Boy, if Menace to Society is about a kid who is basically a criminal, this is about a guy who just is basically just that. He's immature. He won't grow up. Mm-hmm. And doesn't seek any avenues to do that.
Right. He's 20 years old. He has a kid, but he's still living with his parents, and it's Tyrese
borrows his girlfriend's car to go see another girlfriend.
Right.
Because the funny thing is that movie turns it back around, because it's asking, it's like, okay, what kind of man are you making yourself?
Right.
Are you giving in to the temptations that are expected of you in a negative way? That's a very good statement. Mm-hmm. So, but I would recommend, absolutely, check out some of his films. Definitely start with Boyz N the Hood, because I hope that his death will inspire young kids who weren't born then, have come after, to check out Boyz N the Hood. It's a powerful film. It really is. Mm-hmm. And I think it will open your eyes, especially if you're a young white person. But tragically, we don't have John Singleton anymore. Hopefully, his legacy will inspire others to get into filmmaking.
Yeah, I think that.
And that's pretty much all I got this week.
Yeah, that wraps it up, I think. We thank you very much for joining us. You can find us on iTunes. Search for the Pod Bay Doors Podcast with Doug and Jerry. We are right there. Many of our episodes are on there, but what's not is also all of our back episodes are on the Pod Bay Doors Podcast.wordpress.com. You can find us on Twitter at pod_bay, and you can find us at Patreon. Throw a virtual tip into our virtual tip jar, and not a virtual tip, because we can't do anything with a virtual tip.
Right.
But and the same handle as our Twitter at pod_bay. We thank you very much for tuning in, and the Pod Bay Doors are now closed.
The mission has been completed.